student life is to build a better student. And when we say build a better student, build a better citizen, somebody that's going to contribute, that make a difference in the world. So we shoot high. We don't even think about local. We're just like, we're going to make a difference in the world with our students. So living in the residence hall on campus, it's a university residence hall. It's McConnell Hall, is a traditional hall. It houses 372 TAMS students, and we roughly take about 200 a year. So there will be some students that have been there obviously for a year, and then each year we take approximately about 200 students a year. Students always have a roommate. Traditionally, guys have lived on the 3rd floor, girls on the 2nd, and the 1st floor is split between guys and girls. Our website's pretty thorough. You can go to it to look at building dynamics, actually type in a room number, see a schematic of a room. So if you're really interested in those kind of details, it's roughly about 15 feet by 10 feet that you'd be sharing with another person. Room assignments are random. The first year, there's different types of rooms in McConnell Hall. We've got rooms that share a bathroom. We've got rooms with private baths. We've got rooms with no baths. And then you've got a general bath down the hallway. Wings are comprised of about 20 students. And so wings have senior mentors, which are 2nd-year students there for helping out. And they have a staff member that lives on the wing that's actually paid an employee of the building. Everything comes and goes inside McConnell Hall. It's like a beehive. It's where students live, come and go. There's tons of programs. When I talk about programs, these are student activities, which student life within the academy mirrors the high school experience to a certain degree. And then we have a lot of clubs and organizations within. We've got a math club, a science club. We've got a community service group. Again, if you go to our website and you go to the student portal, it will list a lot of those clubs and organizations. We have what we call advised student clubs, which are clubs that have advisors and a formed budget and particular options that they can utilize as an advised group. But then we also have independent student clubs, which are clubs that have been made recently because students are starting clubs based on ideas each year. And then those independent clubs can petition and apply for basically advised status. And then they would be given an advisor, a formal budget, and then be able to operate in the same fashion as all the clubs. So there's independent clubs and then advised clubs, basically. Students can also join UNT organizations. UNT boasts about 350 student organizations, and students are, when they're part of the TAMS family, are also part of the UNT family, and so they can join those organizations as well. There's 2 limitations: the fraternities and sororities, and then NCAA sports. They won't take TAMS students because of their age at this time.
I'm going to do this again. There we go. All right, so sorry about that.
Oh, there's clubs. You can see resources. You can email. You can find websites. You can find Facebook pages for pretty much each of those clubs. Sometimes they make videos, but they're active. They're very active, and they do a ton of things at the hall. So predominantly those programs, living in the building. There's policies and procedures, if you can imagine, when you live in the building. We have certain hours, what we call quiet hours. So after 8 o'clock, Sunday through Thursday, we ask that students kind of mellow out a little bit and then think about studying or just kind of settling down for the evening. When boys can visit girls, vice versa is limited. We do have curfew throughout the week. So Sunday through Thursday, that's 11 o'clock, and Friday and Saturday, that's 1 a.m. where you need to be back in your room, and we count faces at that time. There's a whole host of policies. I think you can, again, go to our website, find it under documents. The handbook will be found, and you can read all about the policies. There we go, showing you on the website. So it's not impossible. It's just kind of guides for student success and safety. So it lists everything within that. So
Lots of stuff.
yeah. We do community service, again, not required, but we encourage students to get involved with community service. We feel as though students are going into professions that already provide a service to the community, so why not incorporate community service now? It's not required, however, our students do quite a bit of service throughout the year. Each class averages about between 16 to 17,000 hours after 2 years of the academy experience. And we count the hours from August till May, and we encourage students to get involved while they're a TAMS student during the 9-month periods. So there's cafeterias to eat on campus. You can eat to your heart's desire. They're building a brand new one across the street from the Welcome Center, across the street from Kerr Hall. But as an academy student, you get an ID and you can visit all the cafeterias. There's Champs over at Victory Hall. There's Mean Greens, which is a vegan cafeteria that a lot of students and myself eat in. Bruce Hall's right across the street, has a cafeteria. And then West also has a cafeteria that's open on occasions. But within a year, they're going to build a new, I'm not sure what they're going to call it, a new super cafeteria that's going to have about 700 to 800 seats that, again, you can access and eat. And the fun part about the dining system is it's a scratch system, which means they create all their food here and they make their food here, as opposed to a third-party system bringing the food in or a third-party contract. So that's that key component, I think, of the UNT dining system that we don't celebrate as much as we should. Believe it or not, with Mean Greens, they've got a what do you call when you grow?
Like the hydroponic?
Hydroponic
vegetables
right next to Mean Greens. So that vegan cafeteria, they grow their vegetables right next to it. So they harvest the greens from that and turn them around and utilize them in the cafeteria. So a lot of neat things. In addition to that, you can eat in the union on flex dollars. So when you get your ID, basically you have access to all the cafeterias, but then you get a certain amount of money. It operates like a debit system on your meal card. So if you want to go to Starbucks, Chick-fil-A, Taco Bell, Burger King, all these things are located within the union, and you can utilize your flex dollars to eat there as well. So there's a lot of eating options. And again, the cafeteria is open at about 7 a.m. and closed at about 10 p.m. So you can eat nonstop. You go in and out as much as you want. There's no limit, which is a really gracious offering, I think, by dining services as well. So that's student life in a nutshell. It's a blast. I think students, if you've ever gone off to a camp or you've ever gone off to an experience where you're able to spend some time living and engaging in the same activity as the people that you're living in, that's pretty much the TAMS experience. I mean, you're going to school and you're living with these people and you're right down the hall from them, or you're sharing a room with somebody. So you see the ins and outs of everybody's life. The pretenses seem to kind of melt away and everybody sees everybody as what they are. And so you're not posing or you're not belonging to a clique because you see everybody every day. And so everybody kind of rallies around each other, tries to make the best of it. And because TAMS doesn't rank, the level of competition is diminished and the level of collaboration and cooperation is heightened. And I think that plays out within the residence hall as well. We've got students tutoring each other. We've got students tutoring all levels. We do community service at the elementary, middle school, high school, and some of our TAMS students turn around and tutor college students on this campus. And some of them actually wiggle into a part-time job where they're getting paid to tutor college students on this campus. So a lot of advantages and a lot of fun, I think, for students to be involved.
I think you brought up a really good point about them living in the dorm and being there amongst all of their sort of cohorts and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about? I get a lot of questions from parents when they're giving me phone calls or whatnot about the difference between, or the actual rules and regulations over students being in the same wings together, and so like differentiating between gender and that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about that policy?
Yeah, there's obviously visitation issues where we separate the gender. So we have, like I said, men or boys on the 3rd floor, ladies on the 2nd, and then on the 1st floor, the boys and girls are split up as well. And so to visit each other, there are limited hours. I think it's 4 to 8 during the week and 4 to 10 on the weekends. We consider Friday and Saturday the weekends. And that's a time when boys can visit girls, vice versa, but they must be escorted. So if I were to visit you, you would need to come get me in the lobby and then you would escort me to your room. And even when I got to your room, the door needs to be open, the lights need to be on. Everybody kind of needs to be on the up and up when they're visiting each other. Those are limited hours. And again, even when visitors come to the hall, visitors have to be escorted all the time. So if you're not part of the TAMS family, you've got to leave an ID at the front desk and always be escorted. Outside of opposite sex, we put limits on in the evenings. So first semester students can basically, once they're checked in for room checks, can travel their wing and be on the same floor for 1 hour. And then at 1 hour past curfew, then we regulate that they return to their rooms, and they need to stay in their rooms until the morning. So we're trying to get people to think about sleep. We also turn off the internet at 1 a.m., which sometimes shocks students. But the goal is for students to try to get a decent night of sleep. And that's our goal when we have students like that. So those are some of the limitations of visiting and traveling. If it's the same gender, it's only after midnight for first semester students. And once you move into your second semester and third semester, obviously, and fourth, you've got access to travel downstairs and hang out in the public space, which is the Mac Cafe. In the 60s, it used to operate as a cafeteria, so it still has the moniker of cafe. But it's no longer a cafe, it's just a big open public space at this time. So.
How do the students get around? So I know a lot of parents will ask us, well, you know, my student's going to be there, and in particular, the juniors are not allowed to have a car on campus.
Sure. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about how, once they're here, how they get around for either, you know, their community service, or maybe even just, you know, to get off campus for just a little while with their friends.
Yeah, fortunately, there's a couple options, really. TAMS has 5 12-passenger vans, 2 minivans, and
unknown participant is now joining.
Don't tell us when people come in.
And
sorry.
And the staff basically are the chauffeurs for a lot of the student activities. And so if it's a community service event, we ask that there's a minimum of 5 students, and we'll drive them pretty much anywhere in the Metroplex area. Also, if a student has a physician or a orthodontist or something, that appointments for some type of healthcare, provided it's in the Denton area, we'll make those transportation accommodations as well. The students, once they're UNT students, have free access to the Denton bus system as well. So you can take the buses anywhere in the city of Denton. You can go to the mall, you can go to movie theaters, those types of things. Also, the city of Denton is contracted with DART system, and so you can ride the train from Denton to the DART system for free. So that's something that's relatively new, but you take a free bus from campus to the train station, and then get on the train free in Denton and go to Dallas. And then you have to buy a transit pass once you get to Dallas, but pretty inexpensive and pretty convenient to keep students off the road. But that first year students are restricted from bringing a car up. Second year students have the responsibility and the latitude to bring a car up. It's not required. I will caution you that UNT loves to charge for parking, and so that's a fee that would be shouldered by the family or the student. If they were to bring a car up, it ranges anywhere from $275 to $400 a year for a parking decal on this campus. So that's something just to be aware of. But your first year, we don't allow you to bring it up, so you save that much money. So go live large with $275, $400. So.
And I know one thing that we really promote at many of our events, once your student goes through the application cycle and is admitted, is that 24-hour desk is really sort of integral in their lives. Can you talk about some of the components of the front desk and how the students are involved in that?
Sure, yeah. Every residence hall on campus has a front desk. When they are staffed on campus varies, except for McConnell Hall. Ours is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have full-time staff that staff it between the hours of roughly about 7 a.m. Till about 6 p.m. And then again, starting at 11 p.m. up until that 7 a.m. mark. In between those hours, the hall staff will staff that desk, as well as some part-timers. But that desk is always staffed, which means somebody's there monitoring the cameras, because we have cameras in and around the building, so we monitor the feed from those cameras, as well as receiving phone calls and also dispensing things at the front desk. So the front desk is, again, the major information hub and accessories hub, I guess you could say. So students can check out game systems. They can check out ping pong and billiards, keys to public rooms. So if they want to go study in a public room, they can check it out. We've got a kitchenette within the McConnell Hall, so students go in there to cook and bake items for each other. So there's always baked goods, it seems like, floating around McConnell Hall. They have sales where students make food and turn around and sell it to each other as well. So the kitchenette is utilized quite a bit, as well as some of our other public spaces.
And I guess on a sort of another note, bless you, for the 24-hour desk, can you tell us a little bit about when the kids get sick and how that, kind of goes down? Yeah,
McConnell Hall is located, fortunately, right next door to the Student Health and Wellness Center. So as part of your fees, believe it or not, you can get access to the Student Health and Wellness Center as part of your student activities, or your student fees basically will get you in there. And that gets you free advice, free medical advice. So if you're not feeling well, you can get evaluated. I think when they apply things or do tests is when costs are incurred. So students can access that. It's an appointment-based system. So anywhere between, it's usually like 8 to 5, you can schedule an appointment with a physician or a physician's assistant. And if you're a little bashful about doing that, our staff will assist you with that. But then you can meet with those staff members over there. Outside of those hours, if there's something that needs to be taken care of, our staff will drive you to a local facility. Denton Presbyterian Hospital is 7/10 of a mile away from McConnell Hall, so we've made that trip often enough to take students there. And then there's some urgent care centers and that are less expensive that we would be able to drive students to as well. There's a pharmacy located 1 block off of campus, CVS pharmacy, so students can get their own medicines there. But if that doesn't take your certain insurance or out of network, we would drive you to whatever facility in Denton meets your needs. So the staff are there. Anytime we transport a student for a medical reason, we contact the families, and so families are in the loop with that, especially for emergency sakes. But anything outside, like I said, that we're transporting, we usually contact the families to let them know. Students can ride with other students. I mean, the second-year students have cars, so if you're concerned about how your students are getting around and you're like, oh, we're not on board with that, well, that's something you would work out with your student. We can't strictly monitor that, but if you're like, no, we don't want our student riding with a second-year student, you work that out as a family and make sure that if they do need to ride somewhere, that they contact the staff and the staff would take care of them.
Speaking of sort of that independence, what do you, how do you handle the students going home and getting to see their parents? I know I get a lot of, especially with the incoming juniors, I get a lot of questions about, well, are we going to be able to see our student? You know, they're going to go away. We're not going to see them until like winter break.
Well, you can do it like this. What is this? What kind of software is this? I mean, you can always chat. Families are always welcome to come up. We don't discourage parents from coming to visit, so you're always welcome to come up. The reverse of that, students going home, we put limits on that purposely because we want students to figure out what it's like to be a university student. We want them to figure out their weekends, how to book their weekends. Do they study? When do they get out of bed? How do they get involved in community service or research, or if they go to some student activities? This weekend is UNT versus UTSA, so they could go to NCAA Division I football game. So there's a variety of things they can choose for them to do. However, we put limits. So on a first semester, we'll just deal with a first semester student. There's 15 weeks in a semester. 4 of those weekends would be what we call a closed weekend. And a closed weekend is when we shut the building down and we're like, go home, go somewhere. So the staff gets a moment to kind of breathe a sigh of relief. So out of 15 weeks, 4 of those would be closed. So we're down to 11. Of those 11, we allow students to exercise what we call travel options within those 11. So if you have a family reunion coming up, or you have something celebratory that you want to be home that weekend, you just have to apply. Parents confirm the details and the student travels for the weekend. So you have 11 minus those 3, so 8 weekends you must stay on the university campus. Families that are local have the advantage of coming up and maybe taking their student, picking them up in the morning, bringing them back by curfew, that's fine. But if it's an overnight trip, we consider that a travel. So that would need to fit within the 4 closed weekends or the 3 travel. So that means of those 8 weekends, you got to stick around. Each semester, you get more travel options. And And believe it or not, by the time you're a 4-semester student, you get 9 travel options on a 15-week semester. And that's because a lot of our students are doing college visits, competing, going to conferences. So they need a lot of extra travel during that last semester. But each semester it bumps up. So your first semester you get 3, second semester 5, third semester 7. You can see where that goes.
And speaking of competitions, how do you handle if, and I know many of the parents will call and ask about, my student is involved in these activities. Is there a capability for them to come and actually do competitions within certain activities that they're interested in?
Yeah, I think, again, I would encourage everybody to go look at the student activities and the clubs. So what we do is we fully support those organizations. So there's a collection of students that are trying to fly to Boston for a math competition. So I think it's outrageously expensive, but we're trying to raise money to do it for these 6 students. We're traveling to Texas A&M for TJAS, the Texas Junior, I don't know, it's some kind of a research competition down at A&M. And so we're driving students, we're flying students to different competitions. If you have a specific interest, you might hit us up individually, but again, we do the math and science stuff. We have gone with HOSA and DECA and competed with those. Our robotics team travels. They've gone to Amarillo, St. Louis, Houston. So we do some traveling with some of the student activities. We have some students that have really specified or specific interests. We've got a young lady that wants to continue with her equestrian skills. And it's like, well, we don't have a barn next to McConnell. And so that's pretty much on the family to keep that interest moving. And again, the travel would need to fit within our policy. So, if she or he's really wanting to get into horses and compete, and those competitions are on the weekend, that means she would use those 3 travel options plus the 4 closed weekends to maximize those competitions. She couldn't come to us, or he couldn't come to us and say, but I'm competing in my Olympic equestrian event, I need more than 3. Well, then you have to measure. If that's something you really want to pursue, then maybe this just isn't the place. So while we support a lot of those extracurriculars, we do set limits because, like I said, the magic here is being part of our community and understanding what it's like to be successful academically here. Then the extracurriculars kick in. So.
I know that you touched a little bit upon the discipline process. Do you want to expand on, like, if how we kind of manage if kids get into trouble?
Yeah, I would, and invariably, you can imagine if 370 students living together in one building, getting used to what it feels like to be in a community. So with those guidelines of quiet hours and visitation and rough housing and using vocabulary that's suitable for all days and times. This is stuff that gets monitored. And, a lot of times parents are shocked or students are shocked because they get documented for something. And I think it's just an adjustment period time where you're carefree when you're home and you're yourself when you're with your buddies. So that we want students to be comfortable, but at the same time, we have to put limits to the amount of noise. We have to put limits to when girls can visit boys and vice versa. So, and it's not that we want to be draconian. These guidelines are put in place to put a frame around the students so they understand the limits, and these frameworks aid in the success and prosperity of our students. So students figure that out. Families are a little bit shocked sometimes. I mean, you can't be running around dropping the F-bomb and not think we're going to try to correct that. So that's sometimes a shock, Parents are like, what? My daughter, my son uses that kind of language? Well, yeah, I guess they do, And our goal, obviously, is just to try to work our ways out of that. But again, most of these policies are not impossible. In fact, a huge percentage of our students go through the academic experience without being documented, which is what we classify a behavior that steps outside of our policies. Doesn't mean they haven't, it just means we haven't caught them maybe. But again, it's not impossible for a student to get through. But the policies and procedures are in place. We're very strict about drugs and alcohol. It's kind of a hardcore one. We draw a line in the sand that says you will not engage in those 2 substances. If you're really into that, you might want to stay home with your folks. but that's an automatic dismissal from the academy. We quantify behavior as best as we can, and students operate on 100 points, which means if you get to 100 points, then you're dismissed from the academy. So alcohol and drugs is an automatic 100. You know, if you're stealing from somebody, that'll get you close to 100. If you're being too noisy, we're not too tense about that. So there's no points associated with that. So there's a gradual range that's in our handbook, and you can read more the details about that if you look that up. But it outlines behaviorally a quantified system of this will really get you in trouble. This we're not so worried about. But it's based on logic. I think when you read them, you would understand. If you're sexing it up, you're going to get a lot of points. If you're in somebody's room and it's just 5 minutes after visitation, not that big a deal. But if you're getting busy with somebody, that's a big deal. So it's stuff that we just we make clear, and the students have helped us throughout the years to be clear and to include those details.
Yeah, great. And I think part of the sort of full encompassing message for the hall is that, you know, there's a lot of things put in place that are very mechanized that you guys have sort of ironed out through these, you know, 30 or so years that really make it a really cool place to be. And through that, you know, there's a few struggles, but most students come out on the other side and they're really positive about their experience, especially I think that student life component of like being together and networking and being
yeah, anytime we have our alumni come back, they want to see the hall. You know, it's like they've been gone 10, 15, 20 years, and they want to come back to McConnell Hall, and they got their kids with them. And I'm like, okay, it's just the same building, same rooms. But yet there's something magical when they see their own room, like, oh, remember when you did this? Or, you know, we stayed up all night, or we got silly and ate ramen incessantly. I don't know, whatever it is. But the hall is where the magic kind of takes place, because you're living with people and you're seeing them at their best, and sometimes you're seeing them at their worst. But at the same time, I think everybody is pitching for the same thing, success. Everybody's trying to get successfully through this experience and into the next stage of their life.
So I think student life is probably one of the coolest components about the TAMS program. And I think it kind of shows that we have such a value put on to these students and to really improve them, not just with academics, but also to make them, you know, to just bring out the best of them and have them come out of the program on the other side and gaining a valuable experience while they've gone through it. And so I think that you've had a lot of students that have come through and actually said those sorts of things. So I think we've kind of touched upon all of the student life aspects that I could think of, and possibly you. And then I think we had a question about taking the sick kids home.
Yeah, we'd love for you to take the sick kid home. In fact, you know, I mean, if a student gets ill, we know the TLC is best from the parents. And so sure, you bet. I think that the tricky part is how much they miss of classes. That's what we're worried about. When a student gets sick, we need to get them healthy and back in the classroom. Obviously, if they're sick and communicable, then we ask them to get home. We do have some sick rooms in the building where a student can kind of isolate themselves and get out of the room with their roommates and get healthy there that way. But if families are local, you bet, come get your son or daughter, take them home, get them healthy, and bring them back to us. So.
And another cool thing about that is that sometimes if it's a really big illness, they can go home and not have to take one of their current travels.
Yeah, we wouldn't penalize that. We wouldn't take a travel option if the student is sick. So that's definitely.
And even if they're not local, I see that you posed that question. So that's any of the students. If the parent's willing to come and grab them, that's, you know, we're more than happy to let them go and get away and get some soup and whatever they need.
Parents know best, yeah.
So I'd like to open this up for anybody else to pose a question. We've gone through pretty much all of the student life components that I can think of at this point. And if anybody has any questions to pose, just please do so in the chat here, and we'll kind of hang out and let you guys think about that for a minute.
Last week we had a number of programs. We had a blood drive. Our students organized a blood drive within the building. And then also simultaneously, there was a research symposium. So our research organization, which is really active, invited 3 professors on Tuesday, 3 more on Wednesday, and it's 4 on Tuesday, 3 on Wednesday, and 3 on Friday. And the ones on Tuesday focused on fine arts and computer science. The ones on Wednesday were biology and chemistry, and then the ones on Friday focused on physics and mathematics. And so that was another program put on by the students.
Okay, so on the closed weekends, the calendar says you must be off the wing by 5 p.m. and the building closes by 7. Does this mean the students can stay in the building until 7 p.m.?
Yeah, I'm impressed that you read that somewhere. So kudos to you. Can I call her out?
Yeah.
Sally Lynn,
Yay.
kudos to you for reading something detailed about closed weekends. And that's, I get on to parents and I'm like, don't be the last parent that picks up the student. I mean, we'll never throw a student to the street. So we've got some public rooms that students can hang out in until the parents arrive, obviously. So that's just kind of a guideline, more so to get parents moving rather than push kids out. So.
And then we have a second question here. Are the class schedules fixed like high school, or are they more flexible like actual college schedules? And so for that first semester, some of the coursework is going to be somewhat prescriptive. I think for all the semesters, there's a little bit of prescriptive nature.
Yeah, but the classes, the curriculum is fixed, but when you take them and how much you're in school, like you're probably in school now from like, let's just say 8 to 4 or 7 to 3:30 or something like that. That's not the case when you come to college. I mean, we could put some sample schedules up and show you. But you might have like 2 classes on one day, and the next day you might have 5 classes. And so the key is, what are you doing when you're not in class? And that's what our students find most challenging, is because you're not in lockstep. It's where you might have a math, your first class might not start till like 10 a.m. So your first class is 10 a.m. to 11, that's a math. You might have another one from 11 to 12, and then your next one might not be till 3 in the afternoon. Well, you've got those breaks in there. Are you studying for that 3 o'clock class? Are you doing community service? Are you doing your laundry? Are you studying for the classes you just got out of? So it varies quite a bit. In fact, some of the labs are in the evenings, which is an adjustment for some of our students. So the labs will start at 6, 6:30, 7 o'clock, and not get out till 9 or 9:30, which some parents are like, oh my gosh, my students roaming around at night on campus. It's in groups, which is the best part about it. So it's never in a first semester is a student in a class by themselves, maybe not their second or third semester. Your fourth semester, you might get into an elective, but basically the classes are combined. They're either heavily TAMS students or if they got a few university students sprinkled in there. So these evening classes that you might be concerned about, there's always going to be a collection of TAMS students that move around. And thankfully, knock on wood, the campus is really safe and it's got a great record for taking care of that. So it's very flexible. And in fact, your second semester, you choose your own schedule of when. We'll tell you what, but you choose when. So if you're like, oh, I'm a morning person, I dig 8 a.m. You can sign up for all 8 a.m. classes. But if you're like, peace, I cannot get out of bed till 10, then you choose 10 a.m. and later classes. So that's a bit of responsibility, but that happens your second semester, third semester, and fourth semester, where you choose the time. We'll pretty much tell you which types of courses, but you choose the time. So.
And in addition, that would also be according to whatever track program that you're coming in on. And one of I think the greatest things that is a learning challenge for some students when they come here is they have to learn like time blocking. I know I was talking to a couple of ambassadors over the weekend and they said that they did. They loaded up all of their classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Tuesday and Thursday they have time to go in and do research, which they get to kind of self-monitor on some of their time there. But for them, it's really about being able to have a full day to study. And they say for every class that you take, you need at least like 3 hours per course hour. Is that correct?
So you take 1 to 3 hours.
Yeah, 1 to 3 hours to study. So There's a lot of time that's dedicated to studying. And then there's also a lot of club work as well that the students involved in those clubs. We have another question about, can students bring their own bicycle to travel around campus? And yeah, of course.
Sure, yeah, we've got a bike rack out front, and actually, we also have a bike share program within the building. So even if you don't have a bike, we'll loan you one. You just check it out at the front desk, you leave your ID, we give you a bike, and you can roam all over. And then Denton also has these rent bike system things. You've probably seen them in the Metroplex, where a third-party company, I think it's like for 50 cents, you download the app, and you get their magic bike and tool around everywhere you want. So, and the buses here actually all have bike racks on the front. So if you want to ride your bike somewhere outside on a trail or something like that, you can take the bus to that trail, get off, ride the trail, come back on the bus, those types of things. So bikes, you're welcome.
We also have a bike group, don't we? Or we have bikes that you can check out. Yeah, okay, all right, that's it. It's not an actual club though, it's just.
No.
Okay,
well, naturally takes care of the
They
bikes.
take care of the bikes, okay,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. Closed
So
weekends do over, the one in November overlaps Thanksgiving. But the other ones are just random. So for this year, for instance, the first closed weekend was the weekend after Labor Day. So Labor Day weekend was not a closed weekend, but it was the weekend after that. Our next closed weekend is October 4th, 5th, and 6th. And then the next weekend will be the November 2nd weekend. So there's no holidays around those. And then obviously the one at Thanksgiving will be the other closed weekend for the fall. Those are published. Closed weekends are always published at least, let me say, almost 8 months in advance, 9 months in advance of students arriving. So again, those will be on our website, and students and families can make travel plans. So if there's some flying or some long distance trips that they want to take.
And so the question was, if some of you don't have the chat pulled up, but it was the 4 closed weekends, do they overlap the public holidays? And in addition, they do come home over winter break, and they get a little bit longer than the actual high school students do. So they'd be home for approximate like 4 weeks or something. So
yeah, this fall our last day of finals is actually December 12th. And so the last day to be on campus is the 13th. And so students are out from the 13th of December all the way up to like, January 15th, 16th, somewhere around there. So almost a full month winter break. So
next question, is there a time for parent visits?
Time limit.
Oh, time limit, sorry.
Depends
I was
how,
like, wait a minute, I missed a word.
Depends how you are with your kid, I guess. No, there's no time limit. Obviously, at curfew, we ask students return to the building, and we would suspect that parents would leave at curfew. So 10 minutes before curfew, which again is 11 Sunday through Thursday and 1 a.m. Friday and Saturday. Coming as early in the morning as you like. That's up to you and your student. On the weekends, you can get there at the crack of dawn. You might want to work that out with your student. But then during the week, the expectation is they're going to be in class. And so for parents to visit, I guess the time limit would be on the weekends, but we don't put any cap on that. You might want to work that out with your student, I guess, would be the best advice that I could give you there. So
yeah, I think students have a little, and I had this question actually posed to me at preview days. So I think it's less like a boarding school and more like, so there's not a restriction on your student. They're independent while they're here, independent to go to class, independent to hang out with their friends. It is not in correlation with a boarding type situation where they're required to be in certain places at certain times. They make their own schedules, and then they're required to go to their classes, but there's, other than that, that's on them.
What happens during public holidays, kids staying back, the public holidays that we recognize, I think, are Thanksgiving. And so the building closes at Thanksgiving. If a student has no place to go at Thanksgiving, we find them a host family. In fact, anytime the building closes and a student doesn't have a place to go, we've got host families locally that are willing to take students in. At Christmas break or holiday break, I guess you could say, in December, The building closes on the 13th and doesn't open until January. That's an extended amount of time, so I would hope the families would be willing to take their students back during that time or have another family member take them. And then in the spring, the only other recognized time off is spring break. And so that's typically in March, and that's a week's time period where the campus kind of shuts down as well. And while host families would be willing to step up in that, I would think the families could make arrangements during that week in March. But all other holidays, I guess, say the only winter break is the only one that's kind of universally accepted.
And can non-TAMS students visit and spend time with TAMS students on campus?
Sure, yeah. Non-TAMS students, again, if they come to our building and they wish to visit the student outside of the public spaces, then they'll need to leave their ID and be escorted at all time. But we've got some large public spaces on the first floor where non-TAMS guests can visit TAMS students. And again, I want to echo what Rachel was saying. Pretty much at 6 a.m., we release TAMS students to the public, and then they can go and be where they choose to be. 9 times out of 10, they're not getting out at 6 a.m. They're getting out at 30 minutes before class. And so if they've got a 9 a.m. class, they'll go eat breakfast at 8:30 and then roll to class. But basically the responsibility is on the students to get to class, to get to breakfast, because we don't monitor that. Our expectation is that they're going to fulfill those obligations, but we don't monitor that. And all we ask is that they come back for curfew each night, and that's where we count faces to make sure they get back. So.
And I think that leads into the next question. Is it possible for a parent to pick the child on the weekend and drop off before the curfew time?
Exactly, yeah, I think that's a local family probably that can do that. And sure, that's permissible. I wouldn't recommend it all the time, just because that robs your student of the opportunity to figure out what it means to be a university student. But sure, it's possible. You know, if you're generous, take more than one student with you.
Take us.
And spoil them and bring them back happy and healthy, and so just in time for curfew.
All right. Any more questions? Kind of getting to the end here. Well, we want to thank you for coming this evening. And if you have any more questions, feel free to email me. And I'm typing in my email address here.
Sally asked if TAMS students go to UNT football games. They actually get together as wings and see the games. I wouldn't say students are drawn to the games, but yet there's a lot of encouragement, a lot of reinforcement. In fact, there was just an announcement today at one of our staff meetings that there's a competition. So more students that go from McConnell, i.e. TAMS, we could get a party sponsored by housing, or they would buy the building a new gaming system for students. So they try to build in some incentives. I think the whole campus tries to build in incentives for people to attend, but specifically for TAMS students, you can flip a coin. Sometimes they get into it, sometimes not. It's a lot of fun, I think, to see at least once, and hopefully you get hooked that one experience. So.
And we had a question about sending the recording of the conversation. Yes, I intend to actually place the webinars online for you guys to access as well. And I'll also drop them out via email. I need to do just a little bit of editing, which I've not had the opportunity to do before, to get some of the screenshots of y'all's phone numbers and names and all of that good stuff off the screen here. So that should take me just a couple of weeks, and then I'll get that back out to you. Are there kids with food allergies? Yeah, we've had this before.
Sure, yeah. The kids with food allergies, we actually have a nutritionist that works for UNT Dining that meets with students and families and can kind of coach them. But again, I think this is one of those things where a student needs to understand they're growing into this responsibility. And so hopefully they would understand their food allergies. Hopefully they would choose not to eat those foods that would make them break out or have some type of reaction. So that, again, we've had students, we've had, what's the gluten thing?
Celiac.
Celiac. We've had multiple students come through with celiac. We actually have students come through with diabetes and kind of work with the pump systems and stuff like that. So health issues, we're very well equipped in helping students kind of navigate through that. And once students get here, they, like I said, can meet with a host of staff members but then also figure out pathways for success also.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for being here, and thank you, Russ, for joining us tonight to talk about student life. And
Thank
yes,
you.
of course. And we're happy to see you online. We've got several other webinars that are coming up. Please feel free to sign up for those, as you see on the website where you found this link. And I'll definitely be in touch with you all for the recording. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
You put your preview, your spend a days with these as well too.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
We're on.